Welcome to Good Enough with the Trauma Therapist, a podcast dedicated to empowering you to take control of your life, learning valuable strategies for healing and looking at mental health through a trauma-informed lens. Get ready to feel empowered and confident in managing your symptoms. And now, here is your host, licensed clinical social worker, EMDR therapist, and certified clinical trauma professional, Jamie Vollmoeller.
Welcome to Good Enough. I am your host, Jamie Vollmoeller. Today, we are going to be talking about acknowledging our shortcomings and why I really feel like therapy should be for everyone. And part of that is really, guys, because we are always growing and learning and facing new challenges at all different life stages. So whether it's in childhood, like making friends, navigating all of that, navigating high school and the extra academic pressure, or when we get to college and balancing like having your own independence, to adulthood and having to learn to function as an adult, which I feel like we are not adequately prepared for as children. You know, and then even as we're moving through adulthood, like when you become a parent, that's a whole nother list of challenges and anxieties and worries that come up for you. You know, when you're facing a new job, when you have a career change, when you're entering into new relationships, all of these things can cause a lot of anxiety and worries. And really, it just is always helpful to have a supportive person that's unbiased, that can use their logical brain to help you walk through it, right? And part of the reason this is coming up for me, guys, is I'm pregnant. So I am about 14 weeks pregnant now, and pregnancy for me has never been a joy. I know a lot of women love it, and I'm very grateful that I'm pregnant. I'm very grateful that I'm going to have a baby girl. Happy about all of those things. Don't love how my body feels. Don't love how my brain functions when I'm pregnant. It's really, really challenging. So some of the things that have been coming up for me that I thought maybe our listeners might relate to is, you know, in pregnancy, you have a lot of hormonal changes. For those of us that struggle with anxiety and depression, you're not able to be on a lot of your medications while you're pregnant because of the effects on the baby. And that can make pregnancy really, really hard, especially for people who already have mental health challenges, because now your hormones are all over the place. You have all this anxiety about what's going on. For me, I've been having a lot of health issues with this pregnancy. Thankfully, the baby's fine. Mama's just got some gestational diabetes and some bleeds going on. So it's a lot of anxiety. And when we're going through new phases in our life like that, where we don't feel like we have control, especially. So in my situation, I feel like I have very little control over what I can do. It can feel really, really hopeless, right? And even though like logical me knows I have all the support in the world, I have a very supportive husband, a very supportive family, I have the luxury of owning my own business, and I can work from home if I need to, if I'm on bed rest the rest of this pregnancy. A lot of women don't have those opportunities. And these are all really great things that my logical brain was trying to say as my emotional brain was panicking about all of the news the doctor was telling me. But it can be really hard for us to, you know, focus on what is going right and what we do have control over when we are facing new challenges that feel so beyond our control or so overwhelming that we just don't know what to do, right? So if we're looking at each of the different stages of our life, right, what I have found is that it's really important to see what changes came up and how that might change how you need to take care of yourself, what supports you might need, and how you can better just manage, right? Because when new things come up, we might have to shift. We might have to fall into a different rhythm because what was working previously, like the capacity that I used to be able to run with, is not the capacity I can run with now. And I was actually talking to the show host or the editor today about how it's been very difficult for me to come up here and talk on the air pregnant because my brain does not move as quickly as it did when I wasn't pregnant. I've been struggling with a lot of brain fog. I lose track of my words a lot more easily, and it's really, really frustrating. And I was getting really, really hard on myself, guys. I was getting like, oh, you should be doing better, and just frustrated. And I was talking to, you know, some colleagues and some friends of mine and some family, and talking to people really does help you to kind of find solutions, especially for feeling hopeless. It could feel like there are no solutions because we're just in our feels. But there's always a solution, guys, which is why I'm a big, big advocate of therapy, because there's always something you can do to fix it. So for me, that meant like taking more naps. I now plan to take a nap midday. I also have to make sure that my blood sugar is monitored, because a lot of the brain fog I was experiencing a couple of weeks ago apparently was related to my sugar levels skyrocketing or dropping. So now that I've been more on top of what I'm eating and monitoring my sugar levels, I've been feeling a lot more regulated, a lot less brain fog, and I'm functioning better, right? So those are things that I do have control over, and focusing on what we have control over really helps to mitigate our anxiety. We want to be cautioned that we don't want to try to control everything in our lives, because that also isn't healthy and something that we need to work through. But if you're feeling entirely out of control, like you have no control whatsoever, trying to find a few things that you can focus on that make you feel like, okay, I got this, I can manage, can really, really be helpful in giving you that sense of balance and calm that you need. And just giving ourselves grace, right? Like, I have to accept that being pregnant, I'm not going to be able to do all of the things that I can do when I am not pregnant. I am just way too tired to do and run as fast as I used to when I wasn't pregnant. Like, I can't manage as many things, right? And that's okay. And last week we were talking about direct and empathic communication. And that's something that's really been helping me lately, is just being very open with the people around me about how I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing, where I could use support, and where I really I don't know what to fix. And that's even been helpful, because then even though I'm emotional and I can't find any solutions, the people I'm talking to are always able to find something that we can do to make the day just a little bit easier, right? So being open and honest with those around us allows them to actually give us the support that we need. And especially when we're going through these life changes. I was also working with a client who, just moved into a new house, and, that's a really stressful experience, right? Like, buying a house is stressful. Moving is one of the most stressful things you can do. And she was feeling so overwhelmed. What do I prioritize? What should I be doing today? What should I be doing tomorrow? How do I do all this with an infant at home? And, it's very, very overwhelming for her. So just being able to go to therapy and sort through that and give herself grace and make a to-do list and break that up helped her feel like she could manage so much better. And just gave her some real concrete solutions, because in her emotional brain, it was really hard for her to figure out, what can I do? She just felt like no matter what I do, this is never going to get done. And that felt really, really defeatist, right? No one wants to feel that way. So it's really important that when we're encountering new things in our lives that are really challenging or really stressful situations, like if someone in your family or someone you're really close to passes away, usually we need some support to get through that, right? If you're, buying a new house, getting married, entering into the dating world after you haven't dated for a long time, that can be really anxiety provoking, guys. All of these things, and usually they're anxiety provoking because of us predicting the future, really. Our brains do that. Our brains try to tell us what's going to happen so that it's less scary. But we don't always know what's going to happen. But a lot of the times we're afraid that we're going to repeat past patterns, right? And a lot of the times in our lives when we're not working on things and meeting with someone to find solutions, we wind up repeating old patterns that really make us feel stuck, right? So if I didn't talk to the people around me and be like, what can I do so that I feel a little more regulated and less brain foggy, I probably wouldn't have had the solutions that I have now. And this week I feel 10 times better than I did last week. Just by making those few small changes really helped make a significant impact on my day-to-day functioning and how I feel. So when we get back from break, I want to give you guys some questions so that you guys can look at to help you see what we're doing that isn't working and how do we find solutions to that, guys. So
thank you for listening to Good Enough with a Trauma Therapist. This is your host, Jamie Vollmoeller. If you live in the states of New York or Missouri, we'd love to work with you. New Yorkers, give us a call at Long Island EMDR at 631-503-1539 or visit our website at liemdr.com. And for those of you living in Missouri, please call Brave Counseling and Psychiatry at 573-825-6441. Visit brave-mo.com.
Welcome back to Good Enough, guys. I am your host, Jamie Vollmoeller from Long Island EMDR, and today we're talking about how we start acknowledging our shortcomings so that we can start making changes and stop feeling stuck. I work with so many people who feel really, really, really hopeless, and they feel like they have no control over their situations. And I'm here to tell you that there's always something you can do to change your life. Being proof of that, was not a privileged person, did not grow up wealthy or with money. I worked my way through college. I have plenty of student loans. I have built my business with my own two hands, with only my money that I squirreled away for years and years and years to do so. So if you want to make some changes in your life, you have the capacity to do that. You just got to find that internal strength to do it. So today we're going to start looking at how we start acknowledging those shortcomings. So first thing, if you really feel like you have no shortcomings, which if you have no insight, also please go to therapy. But patterns, right? So every one of us has patterns in our life that we can look at that might tell us what are the things that we really struggle with. Those patterns can be related to different things. It could be in relation to, work, like significant challenges at work. Like I've worked with people who have issues with authority. So they have the same patterns at work come up for them over and over again, where they keep having the same issues. And that usually comes down to their communication styles. In our relationships, right? I work with so many people that have relational issues, like interpersonal issues that have been around since they were children, because that the way that they learned to communicate and relate to others was not exactly healthy. And those patterns continued in their adult relationships. So they have these patterns of failed relationships. And every time they enter a new relationship, it's like everything is sunshine and rainbows and roses until it's not. And then they feel really hopeless, right? So looking at is that a pattern for you? This pattern of failed relationships. And then from there, we can look at, for some of my clients, it's the type of people they choose to be in relationships with aren't always the most healthy. A lot of them even know that going in. They like the chase, they like the ride, but they don't like it long term. Like it's exciting, but it peters out and it's not sustainable. It could also be that, I work with a lot of people who are people pleasers, right? We know this. So they happen to be chameleons. So when they first get into a relationship, they are whoever that person wants them to be. And after a while, that kind of wears off and their true self comes out, or the other person's true self comes out. And then they really don't know how to navigate that, right? So when looking at those patterns, right, it helps us to see what the problem could be coming up for us that is repeating in our lives that we don't like, whether that's, relationships that aren't fulfilling, or a career that's not fulfilling, or not being able to hold down a job, or even you really want to pick up a hobby and just be more worldly and do more things, but you always lose motivation or run out of steam. That's a pattern. So if we look at those things, we can start to slowly dissect what is going on that is holding us back. So the next question is, in those patterns, what is the thing that's holding you back and getting in your way? And so I'll use one of my clients as example. So I work with a client who has been in several marriages that were not great. Highly emotionally abusive. His home growing up was highly emotionally abusive. And he repeatedly gets in these relationships where he feels like he has to save other people, right? And for this client, part of his main issue is that he is so self-sacrificing. I resonate with him a lot, that he doesn't tell the other person what he needs. And he knows that his partner is stressed. He knows that his partner is struggling. So he does all these things for his partner, even though he's really spent and needs support. And then he gets resentful because he doesn't feel it's appreciated. So it winds up in this constant conflict cycle where he does, and then he explodes, and then he does, and then explodes. And he chronically just feels like his needs are never being met. But what's holding him back from getting his needs met is that he's not verbalizing them. He's not advocating for his needs. He's constantly putting himself last. And that makes it really hard for even the people who love us and appreciate us and want us to do well to support us because they don't know what we need, right? And I really think that so many times that is so the case, even with people in our life who maybe have some toxic patterns. Generally, I find that most people are inherently good and they do love us if they're in our lives for the most part. It's not always the case, guys, but for the most part. If you have people in your life that genuinely love you and you don't feel appreciated by them or you feel like you're being used and abused, a lot of my clients who struggle with people pleasing, it's generally because they're not advocating for what's not working for them or what they need or the kind of supports that they need. And they feel like it's all give, and they don't get anything in return. And for anyone, even for someone who's super selfless and loves helping other people, we all do hit our breaking point. And what can we do to change the outcome of those situations so that the ending is more what you desire, right? I was also working with another one of my clients. I have so many people pleaser clients. And she was saying, how she's really struggles with putting herself first. And we were doing EMDR and she was going through like these memories in her head of like why she really feels so alone. And it was kind of funny. We both were laughing at the end because she's like, so my logical brain knows that I'm not alone. I have supportive people in my life. I have 2 adults in my household who could definitely help me and they will always support me. And anytime I tell them what I need, they always step up and help me. But I still feel horribly guilty telling them what I need. And then, then she went into the next EMDR. She came up with another epiphany of like, oh, it always comes back to like, if I don't do it for them, then I feel like they're not going to appreciate me and I need to do this and I'm being selfish and, and all of these internal beliefs that she had, right? So at the end of it, she discovered that the outcome that she needs to change so she doesn't feel so alone is just literally leaning on the people around her, right? Starting to delegate some of the household tasks. And even at work, she's a higher up at work and she's been given extra responsibilities. And eventually when that happens, you have to start teaching people some of the stuff that you do so that they can take over because you need to do higher level tasks. And for someone who feels chronically responsible or not good enough and alone and like it is wrong to ask for help, that's a really hard thing to do. So she had this wonderful revelation in session yesterday that like, oh God, I'm not alone. I have plenty of people that are willing to help me. I just need to ask for help. And one of the things that she's doing to work on that is kind of checking in with herself when she's feeling guilty or feeling uncomfortable having those conversations and having a conversation with her younger self about like how it's really okay and that people in her life now aren't going to be upset with her for asking for help and they're not going to make her feel bad for asking for help and they're actually going to step up and help her because they've shown her time and time again that whenever the very few times that she does ask for help or really more likely with us people pleasers is when we break down and cry hysterically and have our emotional breakdowns. And then everyone rallies to support us because we are not the strong ones anymore. They do rally and support. It's just breaking that cycle before you get to that emotional overwhelm place where you really can't function and everyone needs to support you. And for so many of my clients, that is the pattern we're trying to break. We're trying to break that pattern of being so selfless, being so focused on what everyone else needs and wants from us that we neglect ourselves to the point that we eventually break down and we can't function at the rate that we used to. And that's something she said to me too, like, well, why can't I just keep going? Like I was able to keep going and I go and go and go until I crash. And I was like, yeah, well, if we think about it, like think our emotions in a bottle, right? If you keep pushing those emotions down in a bottle, eventually the pressure is going to build and that top is going to blow off. And all those emotions have to go somewhere. So if we're not dealing with our emotions, if we're not dealing with how we're feeling, they're gonna come up. And in order to feel healthy and have good relationships and make the progress in our careers that we want to, we need to learn to address our emotions. And I want to remind you guys that you are good enough.
Thank you for listening to Good Enough with the Trauma Therapist. We appreciate you listening. while our host may provide some personal and professional advice. We want to remind you that this show is for entertainment purposes only. Each individual situation is unique, and good enough is not a substitute for mental health treatment. If you need a therapist and are located in New York or Missouri, feel free to reach out to us at liemdr.com or brave-mo.com.